It was all Hendrick Motorsports out at Las Vegas today. They survive a late restart and overtime finish to come home 1, 2, 3. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove Las Vegas recap edition. A great day, a very busy day if you're a motorsports fan. That IndyCar race this afternoon damn near reached silly territory when Romain Grosjean and Scotty Mack went into the tire barrier. Had a couple scary wrecks, cars nearly take off. The NASCAR race this afternoon, however, was a bit more straightforward. It was Hendrick Motorsports domination. Even without Chase Elliott, who we can touch on real quick, had surgery Friday night. He fractured his left tibia in a snowboarding accident. He's expected to miss likely several weeks. There is no timetable for his return. Josh Berry filled in and, first time in a Gen 7 car. He struggled. Not surprising, I do not hold that against Josh Berry in any significant form or fashion, but the rest of Hendrick Motorsports, even without one of their star drivers, were on fire today. If it wasn't William Byron finding victory lane, it looked like Kyle Larson had this race all but wrapped up. We'll talk about the winner. We'll talk about many of the top finishers, the couple, really only was a couple notable on-track incidents. We'll put this thing on the groovy gauge at the end. Let's go ahead and start though with the winner, as we typically do during these types of episodes. William Byron gets his 5th career NASCAR Cup Series win, his first win of the 2023 season. A big one considering the first couple weeks of the year had not gone great. I think Byron was, I want to say 29th in points coming into today. Not due to lack of speed. I think we all saw William Byron winning at least one race in this regular season, but to get it done early, kind of like last year. Won a couple races early, kind of coasted through the rest of the regular season before coming on strong late. Getting a win early on allows you to prepare for the rest of the season differently, as he is now more than likely locked into the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. But a big win for William Byron, and a dominant one at that. He led, I think, 176 out of 267 laps, so like 2/3 of the race. He swept both of the stages, that's 20 regular season points as well as 2 playoff points. It was a max points day for William Byron. Wow. Not just a big day, a huge day for William Byron, now that I really stop and think about it. He owes his pit crew for this one, or at least should give them a lot of credit, because they got him out ahead of Kyle Larson during that final cycle of 2 tire pit stops. Allowed Byron to be on the front row, and Truex, who had stayed out with like 40-something laps on his tires, when he did not go, Byron was able to squirt ahead of all the traffic and seal the deal. Backing up, this was going to be a Hendrick Motorsports win either way, because before that final caution for Aric Almirola, which I think was the right call, many fans criticized NASCAR's officiating, quick trigger. It was a little quick, but Almirola was almost completely sideways. There was smoke, smacked the wall. I think it was a fair call, maybe a little quick of a trigger, but it was the right call. But before that caution, Kyle Larson was in control of this race. Now, William Byron, I believe, had the best car all day. We just mentioned he won all the stages, led the most laps. Larson had driven away to like a 5-second lead during that final long green flag run, but in the 6, 7, 8 laps before that caution, William Byron had taken a huge chunk out of Larson's lead. It was down to like 2 seconds. I think it was going to be pretty close coming to the white. Larson was in some lap traffic. Byron was definitely coming on strong. I don't think it was a given that Kyle Larson was going to win this race if it had stayed green. It was a given, though, that Hendrick was going to win this race, and when the caution came out and Martin Truex Jr. in a Joe Gibbs Toyota stayed out, I'm sure Rick Hendrick, who, according to Fox, was watching this race with Chase Elliott from probably Georgia, was biting his fingernails, because anything can happen on these late race intermediate track restarts. We saw last year in this exact race, it looked like Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., the class of the field, they had this race locked up. Late caution, differing pit strategy, restart, and it was ironically a Hendrick Chevy who won here a year ago. So anything can happen on the final restart, but credit to Hendrick Motorsports. Even with Truex on the front row, I think they had Denny Hamlin, a Toyota, in row 2. Byron still gets the win. Larson comes home second, and Alex Bowman, last year's Pennzoil 400 winner, gets a 3rd place finish. 1, 2, 3, capping off a dominant performance from Hendrick Motorsports, and it really was just Hendrick. We'll talk about how Ford, as a manufacturer overall, seemed to struggle today. This wasn't Chevy domination, no, this was Hendrick Motorsports specifically. Sure, Ross Chastain in a Trackhouse Chevy, and actually his teammate Daniel Suarez late seemed to come on strong. They were in contention for a lot of this race. They were in the top 5 or near it, but they weren't in the same zip code as Hendrick. It was Hendrick Motorsports, Next best team was probably Joe Gibbs Racing, Bell, Truex, Hamlin, all spent a decent amount of time in the top 5. Then I might even go 23-11 with Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick having to come all the way from the back up into the top 10 late. I'd say maybe 23-11 was third. And then I'd probably put Trackhouse at fourth. So it wasn't a Chevy domination. It was specifically Hendrick Motorsports. It looked a lot like what they did back at Dover in 2021 when they went 1, 2, 3, 4. If Chase Elliott races today, they probably do that again. The rest of the field certainly has some catching up to do. Let's go and look at some of the other top finishers and discuss some other key storylines. The final overtime restart jumbled up these finishing results a bit. Like, for example, Christopher Bell, he had a top 5 car for much of the day, but he had fallen outside the top 10, was complaining of a serious vibration before the final overtime restart. Thanks to that restart, a good restart, he comes home 5th. Good for Christopher Bell. Bubba Wallace, the best finishing Toyota, though, in 4th. He was up in the top 5, top 10 for a good portion of this race. A really solid, consistent day for Bubba. Austin Cindric ends up being the best finishing Ford in 6th. See, that's what I mean. I don't think he sniffed the top 10 all day long, but hey, best finishing Penske Ford in the Pennzoil 400 when his other 2 teammates both had Pennzoil on the hood. That's pretty cool. Happy for Cindric. Martin Truex Jr. comes home 7th. He stayed out during that final overtime restart, had the lead, but was not able to hold on to it with 47 laps on his tires. I think before the caution, he was going to finish 4th or 5th, so he ends up finishing 7th. Not a huge loss. I think it was still a worthwhile gamble. Justin Haley 8th. Hey, I like Justin Haley, say what you will, but he manages to get the best possible finish out of that car more times than not. Kevin Harvick was one of the best Fords all day long, once again putting Stewart-Haas Racing on his back. He comes home with the top 10, and Daniel Suarez ends up finishing 10th. Denny Hamlin, just a bad final restart. He was 4th, second on the outside lane, drifted up high, lost his momentum, maybe got some debris, some dust on his tires, and just went backwards. He finishes 11th. That stinks because he had a top 5 car. And same goes for Ross Chastain. You know, I'll have to go back and rewatch that final restart a couple of times because he was also up in the top 5, ends up 12th. So I don't know if he got stuck behind Hamlin or what, but they just went backwards, unfortunately. Ryan Blaney struggled with the handle all day long, comes home a respectable 13th. Last week's winner, Kyle Busch, ends up 14th. He really couldn't get any higher up than like 7th or 8th today. Decent run, but not nearly as fast as he was at Auto Club last weekend. And Tyler Reddick ends up 15th. They had to swap an engine out earlier in the weekend, so he had to start this race from the back. Could the start to 2023 get any worse for Tyler Reddick? Drove his way up into like 15th on lap 15. Danica Patrick in the booth was actually the first to point out he was flying, and then he seemed to kind of hit a wall. Until the end of the race, towards the end of stage 3, he broke his way up into the top 10. Final restart, he ends up 15th. Couple other honorable mentions. Brad Keselowski, I believe he was caught up in that last lap crash when AJ Allmendinger got loose all by himself, spun out, got T-boned by, I think, Ryan Preece. Oh, gosh, that hurts to look at. Brad Keselowski, I believe, got caught up in that, went spinning, but he still comes home 17th. I mentioned Harvick was one of the best running Fords. Brad Keselowski was the best running Ford for the vast majority of this race. He was up inside the top 10, often by himself. He finished top 10 at Auto Club last week, so Brad Keselowski and RFK maybe making some small gains here early in the season. Just something to watch out for. He comes home 17th. I just wanted to give him an honorable mention. Corey LaJoie, his second straight top 20 finish. He was 14th at Auto Club last weekend. Want to shout him out. I also want to give a shout out to Stewart-Haas Racing. Not a good shout out, though. Kevin Harvick, as you can see, finished inside the top 10. What else is new? He's Kevin freaking Harvick, KFH. The next best finishing SHR driver was Eric Almirola in 16th, who spun and brought out the final caution. Ryan Preece ends up 23rd. He was going to finish there even before he got destroyed on the last lap. But Chase Briscoe, I am very worried about that 14 team. Y'all can say I'm overreacting because we're just 3 weeks into the season, but this is 2 weeks in a row. The first 2 intermediates, the first 2 true racetracks on the circuit, and Chase Briscoe is unloaded with a 30th place car. A 30th place car. Last week they were able to adjust on it a little and get him up to 20th at least. Today, 28th. That was the best they could do. Maybe they had a key part or piece break or fail for the second week in a row, but from my vantage point, it just looks like they were slow 2 weeks in a row. Really slow. And that's not on Chase Briscoe. The guy won a race and made it to the round of 8 last year. Chase Briscoe's a decent race car driver, even though he's still young. That's on the team. Either the 14 team specifically or Stewart-Haas Racing by and large, because Chase Briscoe should not be unloading 30th in back-to-back weeks. They've got to fix that, and they have to fix that fast. If this was Hendrick Motorsports or Joe Gibbs Racing, I'm confident they would. They've done it in the past, but Stewart-Haas Racing, struggled the last 2 years by their standards, and they're not off to a great start in 2023. Couple other drivers I want to mention. Josh Berry filling in for Chase Elliott this weekend. Just trying to feel out the cars. He'd never raced the Gen 7, the next gen before. Finishes 29th, a couple of laps down. I saw him scrape the wall at least once. Overall, kept the car clean. He ran all the laps. Hopefully, if he's in that car again next week or the next few weeks potentially, hopefully he can start to build on that, because Josh Berry, love what he's been able to do in Xfinity the past couple of seasons. He's a real good story. I want to see him do well now that he has a good Cup Series opportunity. Albeit imperfect, so bad circumstances. He's not working with his guys. He's working with another team's people. I'm not even sure if he had his own seat in the car, if they had to swap things out. Not a perfect situation by any means, but still a pretty darn good opportunity to show a little bit of what you got against Cup Series competition. And the last driver I want to mention is Joey Logano, who ends up finishing last. He started on pole, and both he and his teammate Ryan Blaney just faded. Again, Ford just did not have it. And then Logano kind of squoze up into the outside wall, 3-wide battle, Kyle Busch on the bottom. From my vantage point, Busch maybe came up a little bit, and then Keselowski, seeing that, reacted and probably came up a little too much and didn't give Logano much room. Logano into the wall, spins through the grass, broke a right rear toe link, I believe. Couldn't repair it in time, went to the garage, finishes last. That is a bummer for the driver who won at Las Vegas this past October, obviously the defending series champion. Ford, though. I was critical of Stewart-Haas Racing a moment ago. I do want to expand that to Ford more broadly. Before this season began, Ford, Chevy, and Toyota all had to submit new nose designs. NASCAR wanted to make sure all three manufacturers were within the same range aerodynamically, and all I heard from Toyota drivers, Ford drivers, Chevy drivers all off season is that they believed all three manufacturers were in fact closer together this year than last year. I think almost every driver would say that last year the Chevys seemed to get slightly ahead. Whether that was due to their initial design or if they figured things out as the season went on, Chevy seemed to be ahead, especially early in 2022. I've heard quotes from Hamlin, Truex, that this year Chevy's come back to earth a little bit. Both Ford and Toyota have caught up. Ford wasn't that bad last weekend at Auto Club. They were very much in the mix. They were competitive. So what happened today? Is it solely aerodynamic? Is it something to do with their engines? Each manufacturer still designs, still makes their own engines. Is there an issue there? There obviously wasn't an issue at Daytona a few weeks ago, but the harsher conditions of Las Vegas, the dry, high altitude of the desert, maybe something about that combination has not mixed well with the Ford engines. I'm just speculating, but while Hendrick Motorsports specifically dominated as a single team, nearly every Ford team struggled by their standards. I'd say the one exception maybe was RFK, with Keselowski running up inside the top 10. But every other Ford, Penske, Stewart-Haas, worse than you'd expect. I hope they're able to fix it. Is it the nose design? Is it the engines? Is it something else? I don't know, but hopefully Ford can figure it out. Just checking my notes, I forgot to mention Noah Gragson, 3 speeding penalties? I can't imagine those were all on the driver. There had to have been something wrong with how his tack was set up, his digital dash. I don't know, but man, that hurts. But that'll pretty much do it as far as key finishers, storylines are concerned. One other topic of conversation I saw many fans dishing about on social media was the broadcast. Danica Patrick joined Mike Joy and Clint Boyer in the Fox booth today, and I feel like it was a tale of two different halves. Early in the show, she sounded completely out of place. She was getting interrupted frequently, which wasn't always her fault. But the few times she did say something, it was either not insightful or was contrary to what we were seeing with our own eyes. Like at one point on a restart, she was talking up how great the outside lane was. Meanwhile, Ross Chastain was beating Denny Hamlin using the bottom. Later, she was trying to hype up a storyline. Hey, look at Christopher Bell. He'd taken third. Maybe he was going to have something for the Hendrick cars. She said it. Look at Bell. He's coming. As he was losing 0.2 a lap. Like, I appreciate her trying to hype something up. It just was not there. So the first half, she sounded out of place. The second half, though, stage 3 in particular, I thought she kind of found a rhythm. She was bringing more energy into the booth than Tony Stewart did the last couple weeks for sure. I appreciated that. And she was speaking up more. Again, not every observation was particularly insightful, but she felt like a part of the team. She was reacting to what was happening on the racetrack, and there was more action in that final stage, more things to talk about, to give her some credit. So I thought she improved. I'm looking forward to Phoenix, because I think she's doing Phoenix next week as well. Hopefully she can start that race how she finished this race and bring some much needed energy to the Fox broadcast booth. Her early struggles did make me wish that Fox could just settle on a permanent third broadcast booth member, which, I mean, next year with Kevin Harvick, I think they will. But I'm curious, what did you make of Danica Patrick in the broadcast booth? The whole show production value. Again, it was a busy day of motorsports. Watched the Formula One race this morning. I didn't get to see the whole IndyCar race, but I saw most of it. And I mean, again, it was action packed. But watching all these different motorsports broadcasts back to back to back, you really highlight the differences, what some do better than others. And so it becomes a talking point for sure, especially for us fans watching the race at home. For fans watching the race at the track, the crowd looked okay by modern Las Vegas standards. It was very windy. You could see that on TV. The temperatures, I think, were in the high 50s. So another kind of cool gray weekend out west, second in a row. Hoping the weather at Las Vegas is a little brighter, a little more inviting. Let's just say that. But okay, let's put this race on the groovy gauge. William Byron and Hendrick Motorsports stank up the show the first two stages. There's really no other way to say it. It was not very fun to watch. Multiple grooves, multiple lanes, pretty decent racing mid-pack, but a lot of long runs, and it was all 24. Nobody was catching him. Second half of this race was a bit more exciting. Obviously, you had the three-wide battle, Logano into the wall, forces a restart. You had William Byron lose some track position on pit road. He had to work his way forward. Looked like Kyle Larson maybe had the win. Denny Hamlin, that one restart, took two tires and managed to hold on nicely to second. So there's some strategy elements working out for some, not working out for others towards the end. So stage 3 was really good. First two stages, man, I mean, it wasn't bad racing, it was just dominant racing. If William Byron had to start this race at the rear, we would have had something to watch that first stage, but because he started up front and took the lead on lap 10, it was a clinic. It was the William Byron show for the first 2+ stages. Overall, I'm going to give this race a 65% on the groovy gauge. It was a solid, maybe slightly above average race. For me, I think an average race is like a 60 because, you know, I'm a NASCAR fan. It's hard for me to give a race like a 10 or a 20. So I think an average race is like a 60. I'll give this one a 65. Slightly above average. I enjoyed it. Stage 3 certainly salvaged as much as it could of this event. But let me know down below. Did you enjoy this race? How did it compare to what we saw at F1, which from my vantage point looked like a pretty standard F1 race? Max Verstappen and Red Bull drove off with it. Ferrari, once again, had one of their cars implode at the end. IndyCar was crazy. Scary wrecks, drivers flying through the air, leaders crashing each other late, making up afterwards. Lots of action there. NASCAR, I think, fits somewhere in between today. Solid race, nothing to write home about, but a deserving winner, I would say. But let me know, what do you think down in the comments below? That is gonna do it, I believe. Let me know down in the comment section below how your favorite driver fared today at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like. If you're new to the channel and you love NASCAR and you want to keep up to date on all things stock car racing all season long, hit that subscribe button down below. And thank you to my Patreon supporters for your continued and very generous support. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, y'all. I will see you again very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching.